Hello and welcome to the City of London, a city within a city. People think about London as the great metropolis that we all know, but within it is something called the City of London. It goes back many, many hundreds of years, and it's the epicenter of the global financial system, if the truth be told. It's more than that, however. It is the center of a global web of secret societies that control the planet today, and they come from a series of interbreeding bloodlines which you can trace back to the ancient Middle and Near East thousands and thousands of years ago. And the staggering truth is that these interbreeding bloodlines under different names have increasingly controlled planet Earth from that time to this, never more so than today. In the next few hours on this video, you're going to be introduced, if you've not already read the book, my book, The Biggest Secret, to some staggering, stunning, and I'm the first to say, bizarre information. The basis of the video is an interview with a lady called Arizona Wilder, who was brought up and mind-controlled from almost the time that she was born to eventually, as she did, conduct satanic rituals at the highest level of the satanic ritual network, involving some of the most famous people on the planet. But we'll get into that as we go along. It is bizarre, and that's not even the most bizarre aspect of this story, which I'll come to as we progress. But the bizarre just happens to be true. And this video is designed to be a companion to my book, The Biggest Secret, and you'd get more out of the interview with Arizona if you've read that book. But what I'm going to do to start with is just set up a few basic background details that can allow you, if you've not read the book, to follow the story and the revelations that Arizona is going to unfold for us. As I say, this is not just a City of London financial district. It is the center of a global web. It is the spider in the center of the web, as I expose in great detail in The Biggest Secret and a previous book, And the Truth Shall Set You Free. And what the basis of that shows is that all these apparently different companies, banks, insurance companies, political parties, actually at the top of their pyramids interlock and are controlled by the same few people. About 13 families run the world, and offshoots of these bloodlines under different names. Just give you an example and a little guided tour of where we actually are, because that's a good example of what I'm talking about. Behind me is the Bank of England. This was created in a charter signed by William of Orange, who became William III, the King of England, in 1688, 1689, and he was one of these bloodlines. And from the moment that he took the throne, then the whole thing started to really epicenter in London. This is when the spider at the center of the web really moved in here. So we've got the Bank of England behind me, which was created thanks to William of Orange and the people that controlled him, because these guys are just puppets, of course. Over there we've got the NatWest building. It's one of the big clearing banks in England. If you just come around this statue, which I'll come to in a second, behind me there is the Mansion House. That's the center of government in the City of London, this city within a city. And at the top you'll see the red cross on the white background, the flag. It's the flag of England, and that symbol goes back right into the ancient world. It was the ancient sun symbol of the Phoenicians back in the ancient Middle and Near East, and the Phoenicians had a number of deities. One of them was called Barati, the female. One was called Barat, the male. Barati and Barat became Britannia and Britain because the British culture was brought here by the Phoenicians about 3000 BC and after. And also they had deities, the Phoenicians, called St. George of Cappadocia, who killed the dragon. That became St. George of England, and that's, of course, the flag of St. George, the red cross on the white background today. Also, the Christian deity called St. Michael was an ancient Phoenician deity long before Christianity. So the Mansion House, the center of government, is a very, very powerful place. We go around here, we've got the Royal and Son Alliance Insurance Company. The banks and the insurance companies interlock, and as a result of the fantastic amount of wealth that they can move around the financial markets every day, these interlocking organizations control the world financial system. If a stock market goes down and crashes, it's because it's meant to crash. And not everyone loses, you know, when that happens. If you know it's going to crash, you sell your stock, it crashes, you buy it back at a lower price, you then push it back up again and buy other stock at the same time at a few cents on the dollar or whatever. And that means that a financial crash can actually lead, if you know it's coming because you're creating it, to an amazing expansion of your holdings and your wealth. Over there we've got the Lloyds Bank building. That's another one of the big clearing banks which all interlock and are controlled by the same people. And then there we have the Royal Guardian Exchange building, another major insurance company which, like I say, interlock with all the others. And then we come back to the Bank of England. Now, this financial center, along with places like Wall Street, where the bloodline families interlock again, the same people run America as run Britain, as run Germany, etc. They have funded many, many times both sides in wars. And ironically and sickeningly, behind me, opposite the Bank of England, in the center of this square, is a memorial to those who died in the 2 world wars. Let's just go and have a look at that. What happens in terms of creating wars is a technique, a mind manipulation technique that I've called in my books problem, reaction, solution. And it works like this. If you want to introduce something, say centralization of power through the United Nations, centralization of power militarily with NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the biggest military organization in the world that's expanding all the time. If you want to centralize power into fewer and fewer hands, if you did that openly and said this is what we want to do, there'd be a reaction against that. People would say, hey, this is a fascist state you want to create. We're not having this. But through this technique of problem, reaction, solution, you can actually manipulate people to demand you do what you want to do anyway. So it works like this. First of all, you create the problem, but you get someone else to be blamed for it. You then report that problem through the media in the way you want it reported, because the media is owned by the same people that own the banks and etc. You get the public to react to your problem by saying something must be done, this can't go on, what are they going to do about it? And at that point, they, who have covertly created the problem and blame someone else, who've gleaned that reaction of do something, then offer the solution to the problems they have created. So if you take the world wars, after the First World War, in which the financial centers of London and Wall Street, etc., funded all sides, power on this planet was in fewer hands than ever before. After the Second World War, it was even fewer hands on the wheels of power. And as a result of the Second World War, we had the creation of the United Nations, we had the creation of NATO, and we had this great centralization of global power. Problem, reaction, solution. This is a wonderful example. Here you've got this memorial in the center of this edifice of global power, and it says, to the immortal honor of the officers, non-commissioned officers and men of London who served their king and empire in the Great War 1914 to 1919, this memorial is dedicated in proud and grateful recognition by the City and County of London. I'm sure it is, because as a result of the sacrifice they made, power in the world came into fewer and fewer hands, not least into this area I'm talking in now, and also made a fortune, because not only does it create problem, reaction, solution, when you lend money to both sides, they then have to pay you back that money plus interest. When both sides have devastated each other's countries, they borrow more money from you so that they can rebuild their shattered countries. Therefore, power equals control of money in the world as it is today, and the control of money comes through debt, and wars create massive amounts of debt, therefore massive amounts of control. It says here, their name liveth forevermore. Total bullshit. People who are manipulated to fight wars are merely pawns in a game they don't understand. At the bottom here, it talks about the memory of those who died in the Second World War, 1939 and 1945. How ironic and how sick that that war was manipulated and funded to a large extent from this building here, the Bank of England. The governor of the Bank of England at that time was a guy called Montague Norman, a very, very close friend of Hitler's banker, and it was the Bank of England, Wall Street, and the transnational corporations which had German subsidiaries, not least the Rockefeller Standard Oil in America. Rockefeller's another one of these bloodline families, along with the Rothschilds and others. It was those companies and banks that funded Hitler and allowed him to build a war machine that cost literally millions of lives. And before we move on and expand this story, on the other side of this square is another very appropriate statue. It's of the Duke of Wellington. The Duke of Wellington fought the Battle of Waterloo against Napoleon. And this is a wonderful example again of the way the financial markets are manipulated to this day. What happened was that the House of Rothschild was funding Wellington and also funding Napoleon. And what they did was they arranged, because communications weren't anything like they are today, of course, back then. What they did, they made sure that they knew the outcome of the war, or the Battle of Waterloo, before anyone else in this area of London did. So they found that Wellington, the Duke here, another bloody puppet, they haven't got the strings on the statue unfortunately, so it's not accurate, they realized that Wellington had won the Battle of Waterloo. What they did, however, was put the rumor out in this area that Napoleon had won the Battle of Waterloo. As a result, there was a panic, stocks fell, there was a crash. What were the Rothschilds doing quietly, secretly? They were buying up all the stock they could at those crashed prices. And then along came the real story. Wellington had won the Battle of Waterloo. As a result, the panic was over, all those stocks rose in price, and the Rothschilds were not only fantastically richer, they owned vast amounts more of the economy of this country and in a much wider area of Europe. So the manipulation of the financial markets, that's just an example from the last century, is very much going on to this day. And it's manipulating your life, what your money will buy, and indeed if you have any money at all. And I'll just finish at this location by focusing yet again on the Mansion House. Arizona Wilder, the subject of this video, conducted satanic ritual at the highest level, and we'll come to that in detail. You'll see that in the interview. But it's very much part of these bloodlines that have increasingly controlled the planet over the last few thousand years. When you follow them through from the ancient Near and Middle East up into Europe, where they became the European aristocracy and the royal families of Europe, or royal family if the truth be told, because they're just the same bloodlines under different names, over to America and into the modern world, one thing follows again and again: human sacrifice, satanic ritual, blood drinking, and all this stuff. And I've talked to a number of people who have seen these rituals in the City of London, who have been subjected to some of them. And the Mansion House, the centre of government in the City of London, is one of the key places where it goes on around here when work here is finished for the day. And satanic ritual is very much part of the next topic I want to raise and talk about at another location, and that's mind control. A few can only control billions and the direction of their lives if they manipulate the way we think and manipulate the way we feel. Only by doing that can they control us, because there's not enough to do it physically. And so mind control is the foundation of how it's done, and we'll talk about that at the center of global mind control, at the center of the network that generates it, and that's the Tavistock Institute, not far from here, yet again in London. Well, we're now just a short drive from the City of London, next to this very appropriate poster, Very Bad Things, and I'm on my way to the Tavistock Institute. It is the center of global mind control and the network that does the research and creates the data and advances the techniques to mind control people in many ways. When you think about mind control, you might think of the Manchurian candidate and some robot with a gun. Kill, 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 kill. But mind control is much bigger than that. If you take the definition of mind control to be manipulating the way people think and therefore behave, then the question is not how many people are mind controlled in the world, it's how few are not. Because every time you read a news story which is slanted to get you to see the world, a person or an event in a certain way, and you accept that slant and take it as truth, you're being mind controlled. Every time you see an advertisement and it persuades you to buy something you don't really need, you're being mind controlled. So all these different techniques are used all the time to get us to think and behave the way this few, this clique, this elite want us to. Problem, reaction, solution, getting us to react to events and demanding solutions, the solutions the elite want us to demand. That's also mind control. So mind control is a vast, vast subject. And you know, in the streets of the cities of the world, or the towns of the world, you get these people with the clipboards that are asking you questions called opinion polls. Well, we're led to believe that these opinion polls are to get a feel for what people want so that we can give the people what they want. No, no. Overwhelmingly, those opinion polls are designed to find out if the programming, the manipulation of the public opinion, of the collective consciousness, is actually working. So they'll ask your opinion on various subjects, and if 80% say, yeah, we think in this certain way about this subject, okay, the programs work, brilliant. If only 40% think that way, then the question is, the manipulators ask, what more do we have to do to get more people to think the way we want them to think? So it's all about mind control and emotional manipulation. That's how it works. And we've just reached a point here, a military establishment. The Honourable Artillery Company headquarters, SAH. What is the military? What is the training for the military except fundamental mind control? What happens when you go through the training, especially in the elite organizations like the SAS and the Parachute Regiment in this country, or the Delta Forces in the United States? It is to get human beings to give their thinking processes away to those in the peak caps that have more stars or more stripes on their arm. And you want people in the military to so give their mind away that when someone in a peak cap says, shoot this group of people, then without saying, well, why, or what have they done to me, or whatever, it's all over. Yes, sir, yes, sir. The yes, sir mentality, mind control. And if those people had a drink with the opposition, the opponents, the enemy, they'd probably get on fine. But they don't get to that stage, because when the peak cap says shoot, they shoot. They are mind controlled. And this is what the military is about. So you have mass mind control, you have individual mind control, and I'm just going to now walk just around the corner from here and take you to the headquarters of global mind manipulation. Mind control has been known about for a very, very long time. And to understand many of the things that Arizona will be talking about in the interview, you just need to explain one of the fundamental techniques of mind control. It's called trauma-based mind control. there is a mechanism in the mind that shuts out the memory of trauma. You know when you have a car accident and you can't remember what happened before, the trauma of the actual accident and immediately afterwards? That's because the mind puts an amnesic barrier around trauma. Now that's very, very good, because obviously we don't want to keep reliving and re-remembering severe trauma like accidents and horrors of that kind. But this they began to understand massively in the concentration camps of Germany under the guy known as Joseph Mengele, the Angel of Death, the infamous mind manipulator and geneticist. They began to understand that if you could systematically traumatize someone, particularly before the age of 5 and 6, then you could turn their mind into a honeycomb of self-contained compartments, amnesic barriers, which were unaware of the existence of the others. And if through hypnotic keys, triggers, words, signs, whatever, you could pull one of these amnesic barriers to the front to become the conscious level, that could experience something or be programmed to do something robotically, and then that compartment could be pushed back in the mind and another one pulled forward. Now this new one has no idea the other compartment exists, let alone what it's experienced or what it's been programmed to do. This has become known as multiple personality disorder, or DID, dissociative identity disorder, which is much more appropriate. And for short, these people are known as multiples, and this is some of the terms that Arizona will be using in the interview. Now we've reached a point here, if we just turn around, of the headquarters of the Global Mind Control Network. This is the Tavistock Institute in Tabernacle Street, 30 Tabernacle Street in London. It was this network, and is this network, that coordinates the mind control program around the world, both on a mass and individual level. The background to this organization is this. It used to be part of the British military psychological warfare department, appropriately, and it was developed by a guy called Dr. John Rawlings Rees. And other parts of the network were established around the world. Stanford in America is one of them. And together they coordinate the mass mind manipulation of the human race and mind program people on an individual level. Just to give you an idea, these mind control people are overwhelmingly those that do the assassinations. Why is it always a lone nutter that's responsible for assassination? So people say, oh, he was just a nutter. No conspiracy, no more investigation necessary. Why is it that the same psychological profile keeps turning up all over the world with guns, going crazy with guns in the street, killing people, creating problem, reaction, solution situations in which legislation comes through and is introduced as a result of those horrors? Interestingly, Martin Bryant, the man who went crazy with a gun in Port Arthur, Tasmania, just happened to be treated by a guy called Dr. Eric Cunningham Dax. Now, Cunningham Dax was the Tavistock Institute representative in Australia and a close associate for decades of Dr. John Rawlings Rees that sent the whole thing going. So when someone goes crazy with a gun or these horrific things happen, we need to ask the question, are they doing it from their own mind, or are they programmed to do it because of the effect of what they do? Now, Arizona Wilder was brought up from birth in these mind control programs, and her programmer was Joseph Mengele, the Angel of Death. And when he eventually died in the late 80s, because the subject of the programming becomes so attached to the programmer, almost worshipping the programmer, when the programmer dies, often the programming starts to break down. It did with this lady, and that's why now she's speaking out and talking in staggering detail about what she experienced and the people that she was involved with. People might find it hard to believe that Joseph Mengele was in the United States and South America after the war, but there was a British intelligence, American intelligence operation called Project Paperclip, which got people like Mengele and other leading Nazis out of Germany at the end of the war to continue their mind programming and to continue their genetic research and manipulation in America after the war, in the United Kingdom also. So this is some important background to this Arizona Wilder interview, but it's not even the biggest secret. The biggest secret is even more bizarre than that. Well, I've now come literally a few strides outside of the official boundaries of the City of London into an area known as Temple Bar, where the Royal Courts of Justice are established, and this is the centre of the British legal profession. Not just the British legal profession, but the legal profession of the world, as the biggest secret exposes. This is where they come to the bar, as it's said, to become barristers, the top of the legal profession, and eventually to become the judges that are part of the network and the secret society network overwhelmingly, who are told what to do. And when you've got judges being told what to do by the secret society network, what justice is there? Temple Bar is named after the Knights Templar, one of the secret societies in the ancient world that I talk about in my books, and they were part of this network, and their successors are continuing that manipulation and agenda to this day. Now, I'm standing across the road from the Royal Courts of Justice here, outside something called the Outer Temple. This is one of the major secret societies that manipulate and control the legal profession and the workings of so-called justice in Britain, and indeed, like I say, further afield. But the reason I've come here overwhelmingly is to point out something in the centre of the road here at the boundary between Temple Bar and the City of London. And it's a massive reptile figure, dragon figure, in the centre of the road. Now, we're getting into what the biggest secret is here, because when you go around London, and indeed looking at the coats of arms of the aristocratic families, etc., again and again you keep seeing reptiles, you keep seeing dragons, and you've got the serpent race and the dragon race constantly recurring in the ancient texts describing the gods of the ancient world. And there is a reason for this. There is a reason why dragons appear everywhere, and that is the biggest secret, which Arizona Wilder also has experienced. Right at the start of our little tour of London, in that square outside the Bank of England, it's also possible to see again this same theme that keeps reoccurring of flying dragons, of flying serpents. We've seen one major serpent figure, serpent statue, at one entrance to the City of London near the Law Courts, and here I am now alongside the River Thames at another entrance to the City of London, this epicenter of global control. And what do we have to signpost the fact that you're entering the City of London? Yet another flying dragon, this one holding the shield with the red cross and the white background, this ancient symbol that I talked about, with the flag on top of the Mansion House and the flag of England, the flag of St. George. So what's going on? Why, when you look at the ancient accounts of the ancient gods, do you again and again see this reoccurring theme of the serpent race, the serpent gods, the flying serpents? Why, in my research for the biggest secret, have I come across a stream of people from different walks of life all over the world who have told me the same thing, that they have seen, to their astonishment and amazement, they've seen key people in positions of power just demanifest from being a human physical form and become before their eyes a reptilian figure. When you look at the ancient gods of the Indus Valley, they talk about the Nagas, the gods who, wait for it, had the ability to manifest as human or manifest as reptiles. This is absolutely vital to understanding parts of the Arizona interview, because she has experienced exactly this. And the background to what's happening is quite simple. This three-dimensional world that we appear to live in is only one frequency, one dimension of existence. We have a frequency range which we can perceive. We call them the physical senses. But outside of that range are other frequencies, other dimensions of existence and life that are sharing the same space that we are. In the space that my body is occupying now, for instance, are all the radio and television frequencies broadcasting to London. I can't see them, they can't see each other, they're not aware of each other because they're on different frequencies. Only when the frequencies become very close do we have what we call interference on the television or interference on the radio. And it's the same with creation. We live in conscious terms in this three-dimensional world. So this is our reality, this is what we perceive. But there are other dimensions. And the one closest to this is the fourth dimension. And staggering as it may seem, and you really have to read The Biggest Secret to see the immense supporting evidence for this, a reptilian race from this fourth dimension is the source, or one of the key sources, of the manipulation of this world. Back in the ancient world, again documented endlessly in so many parts of the world, in ancient texts and legends and accounts, are the stories of how this extraterrestrial race interbred with humanity, creating hybrid bloodlines. And when you do the genealogical research, you find that it is these human-reptile hybrid bloodlines that actually have occupied the major positions of power through the history of the last few thousand years, and today are in the key positions of power, running the banking system, the business system, the politics, the military, etc. And Arizona Wilder, who had no idea of all this other information coming towards me in researching The Biggest Secret, when I met her, she said and told me about how at various satanic rituals involving the most famous people in the world, she had seen them again and again turn into reptile figures and then come back again during the ritual. I got a call from the head of an organization in America called Parents Against Ritual Abuse, who told me again from her experience how many of her clients who had been subjected to satanic ritual had reported the same story of how the participants had shape-shifted, as the term goes, from human to reptiles and back again during the ritual. And one of the key areas, one of the key families identified by Arizona Wilder in her accounts is one not too far from here, and it's very famous indeed. And that family and that bloodline live here, or at least partly live here. Buckingham Palace, one of the many palaces and homes of the British royal family, the House of Windsor. They're seen as bastions of the establishment, the British establishment, but in fact the Windsor bloodline is not British at all, it's German. It's really the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. And on Prince Philip's side, the husband of the Queen of England, he's a Mountbatten, which is really Battenberg. Again, another German line. In 1917, they changed the name from Battenberg to Mountbatten, from the House of Saxe-Coburg to Windsor, because at that time, you may recall, the German nation and the British nation were knocking hell out of each other in the trenches of northern France. And it was good PR from the British royal family's point of view to just change their name to sound more English. And this is just the farce and the facade behind so much, or behind which so much goes on. However, most people, if not almost everyone on the planet, would find the fact that the House of Windsor are one of these reptilian-human hybrid lines that shape-shift between human and reptilian form to be utterly, devastatingly ludicrous and unbelievable. I understand that. But the truth, the real truth, often is. And Arizona Wilder, in the interview that's coming up now, is going to talk about her experiences of seeing this happen. Well, I think that's all you need to know and appreciate to understand the kind of information that Arizona Wilder is going to reveal to us now, except one thing. Across the millennium years is crunch time in this whole agenda, crunch time for the human race. This is the time when this network of interbreeding bloodlines wants to bring in its global fascist structure of a world government to which nation states would be administrative units, of a world central bank and a world currency, a currency that wouldn't be cash, it would be merely electronic, for which there are fundamental implications for human freedom. and also the World Army, which is designed to be NATO, expanding and expanding as it is now, of course, to become the fully fledged World Army, World Police Force. And underpinning that little lot is designed to be a microchip population, in which we are microchipped with our financial details, our medical details, etc., etc. And that would allow not only electronic tagging, people knowing where we are all the time, it would allow the external manipulation through this electronic means of our mental and emotional processes. This will happen unless the human race wakes up and wakes up fast. And to do that, we need to understand what's really going on. And to let people know that, we've got to stop beating about the bush, stop pulling punches, stop pussyfooting around, keeping information from people, oh my goodness, how will they react, and just say, this is going on, take it or leave it, make of it what you will, but this is what's going on. And some of the information you're going to hear now is quite horrific, but if we don't know about it, what can we do to stop it and to change it? I spoke to Arizona Wilder in Los Angeles, and this is what she had to say. Arizona, can we start at the beginning, and can you tell us the story of what's happened in your life from the very start?
Okay, what I can tell you is that before I started looking into my life, back in 1989, I was starting to have flashes of things, and my life was not what it seemed to be, which is why I started looking into it. And what I found out was that I had a lot of missing time, and a whole lot of missing time, as to what had occurred in my life. And when I started looking into what had happened in my life, it was the only way that at the time that I knew, was to start going to see a therapist. Within a year, I was talking about memories of being sexually abused by my father, which was part of what was supposed to happen. And I was starting to talk about mind control issues, and I was talking about ritual abuse issues at the time, and I didn't have the whole thing put together. It's taken me years, all these years, it's taken approximately almost 10 years to put this together, what has happened to me. And in the process, I have lost everything that I ever had in my life, and anything I held dear in my life. I was bred for this role that I fulfill, and it was planned from before my birth, and it was because of the bloodline of my mother's family, which comes down through Ireland, but before that it began in France. It was through the Marquis de Stac, which he came to Ireland and changed the name to Stack, and then I was chosen, and the birth was planned. My parents were forced to move down to this area for the reason that the High Council is down here, which is, there are 6 councils of 13 in this country, and the High Council is down here.
We're talking the United States?
The United States, yes. And so from the time that I was a baby, I was being abused and traumatized, and on purpose, for the mind control that they need someone to go through to do whatever they say, to be as just a puppet in that they can control every move. And you don't remember, I didn't remember a lot of things, because I have, as a result of all of this mind control, split off many parts that all hold memories, hold feelings, hold programs, hold information, and I've been working very hard to pull all of that up. And it's been a long, slow process for me, because there don't seem to be a lot of people in the field that I only felt was the only way I could go was psychiatric and psychological. They don't seem to know what is really going on, and I believe that a lot of them are afraid of being sued should they suggest something, and so they cannot lead or suggest. And it's been a process of me having to trigger myself to remember, and be around people that can help me with that can't really be touched by the False Memory Syndrome Foundation.
So what happened? You say you were abused as a child as part of this compartmentalizing of your mind. What went on after that, as you got older?
Well, they start with wanting to make you an obedient slave at first, and so they do a lot of sensory deprivation, they do a lot of sensory overload, and they switch between the two, and they do out-and-out torture. They take a small child and they electroshock. In my case, it was electroshock to the brain, and they would take away my chance to sleep. They kept me awake for many hours at night, would not let me sleep. And I was also told things, as this was before the age of 5, I was told things such as, they would make me drink water, and they would say, if you pass urine, you're going to have to drink it. And they would make me drink it. And if you have bowel movement, you're going to have to eat the feces, which is also what happened to me. And then they would play, there was a programmer that was programming me, a very infamous person in history, who actually has been in this country, and he was known as Dr. Green. Who he actually was Dr. Mengele, from Joseph Mengele, from the concentration camps in Germany, and he was he stayed a lot at China Lake Naval Weapons Station out here in Southern California, in the desert area. And I would be around this man a lot, and he used to tell me that the scar that he had on the left cheek of his face was actually from, he was into fencing, and that it was from that, but actually the scar on his cheek was from one of his own programming techniques, that he would put a child in a box and with a sword and tell the child to defend the box, even if it meant his own death. Then he'd tell another child to break into the box, and which this child would do, and then the other child would then jump out of the box and shove the sword or the lance straight through the other child. And at one point he got into it where this child actually got him in the face with the sword. And he would wear a huge emerald ring on his left hand, on this middle finger, and he would twist this emerald around, and for programming, and he was into using long colored ribbons of different colors, and you had to choose a certain ribbon, or you were given a certain ribbon, and that meant that this certain thing was going to happen to you. and it was like picking sticks out or drawing sticks out of a hand, out of someone's hand. I saw games of Russian roulette played where it was chosen beforehand that a child would die, and the child would put the gun up to his head and pull the trigger, and this child would end up dying. But it was meant to scare all of us, keep us in terror, as there were many other children that were around me that went through the same thing. I have run into people from my childhood that have known me, and I've recognized their names, and even if they change their names and change their hair color, as I have done, they have recognized me, or I have recognized them, and I know their name. They know my name. There isn't any way for this to have happened. It's just beyond coincidence. And when you get older, I mean, they start taking, this programmer in particular, Mengele, would take me to rituals. I went to rituals with him all over this country and in Britain and in France, and it was known by intelligence agencies in this country that this man was here. They brought him here.
Is that Project Paperclip you're talking about?
Yeah. Through the OSS. And my family, or my so-called family, are all DID. They have not. They are very well programmed, and they have not sought help. They have not gone in and tried to figure out what's happened. They believe they've had this certain kind of life that they've had, and as far as they are concerned, I am crazy. And they have much different memories of what I have, and I was always told certain things by my parents that my sisters were never told. And biologically, I have to add at this point that my mother is my mother. I am not biologically related to my father. And this has to do with the bloodlines, and his was considered impure. And this is all about purity of the bloodline. And that is why I am involved in this. There are people that are involved in this that it is not so much because of bloodline, but they have the ability to dissociate and be used as slaves by these people.
You say that you come from a certain bloodline, and there is this obsession with bloodlines that this Brotherhood Illuminati have. Why is that? Because
what first started coming out was about the Aryans, and the purity of the blood. And what it's all about is that the blood and the menstrual blood contains something that is important for the propagation of this race that is controlling things on this planet. And these people that are in the organization that the Council of 13 is under, and they have something called the Grand Druid Council, or the Octagon, they're called the Illuminati. And the Illuminati are actually run by these 13 bloodlines, which are all of the royal families in Europe and in England. And they need the blood because they are, in fact, not human. They take human shape. They are reptilians. And they need the blood. The blood helps them maintain their reptilian shape, and it helps them maintain their sanity, and it helps them to live in this world because they are not from this world.
Does that relate to what the Nazis call vril power and what the Hindus call the serpent power in the blood?
Yes, the blood has something. It has something in it. It has secretions from the pituitary gland and from the pineal gland, and it has a very strong drug in it that they also, I mean, this is the one that keeps them from going crazy, and it's like heroin or like endorphins, and it's much stronger. But what they need is, for it to be secreted in the blood, is they need terrorization of their victims before they are killed for their blood, or if a young woman is beginning to menstruate, they need the menstrual blood, and they have to terrorize them to get this to come out in the blood and be secreted in the blood.
Is this the what other people have told me about, that at the point of great terror, like the point of sacrifice, there's an adrenaline that enters the bloodstream? Is this what they're looking for?
Yes, that and this other element comes and secretes out through the blood. This all comes out through the blood at that time, and it's at that point they are actually staring into the eyes of the head of at some of these rituals, or at a reptilian. They are staring into the eyes of this person, and they're held. It's a hypnotic gaze these reptilians have, and it holds the victim in an absolute trance, in a trance of terror, and then they are killed at that moment as they are staring into their eyes. And not only do they can't hold their shape when this happens. The human shape they cannot hold. They go back into reptilian shape as this is happening, because it's like an animalistic type of excitement of the kill. And they oftentimes they will just rip into the victim and eviscerate them and start eating the flesh of this person too. And the fat from the intestinal area is highly valued, as they use it on their skin. And they drink the blood, and the blood is highly sought after, and it goes according also to rank within these creatures, as to who gets what when. And their sacrifices have increased in the last, it started increasing in the early 80s. The amount that they were doing is increased. And they use a lot of druidic holidays to do this, but they have other days too. They've mixed all of these satanic and what are called satanic holidays and druidic holidays, and in order to have these rituals, which ritual seems to be important to them, but they also use it in order to drink this blood. They seem to need more.
Have you any idea why it's increased since the 80s?
So there are changes going on in the earth. It seems they're not able to hold their shape like they once were able to, and people see them shapeshift more and more, and they need the blood to try and maintain it, to try and maintain their human form. I believe there's a time coming that because of what I've been told, when they are not going to bother having to hold that human shape at as they had to before. And they want that time to come. It's almost upon us.
So when you're talking about the fact that the veil is lifting on these reptilians so that people can see them far more easily and far more often, does this relate in any way to the fact that there is this desire to bring in this rigid structure, including microchipping and many other things, across the year 2000, which has become known as the New World Order? Is that coming in because it is known that the people are going to see what the game is and there has to be control of the people at that time?
Yes, it's very connected. I started talking about the New World Order back in 1990, and I was very psychologically and physically affected so much by what was coming out. I wasn't watching television. I was not aware that certain individuals in this country, George Bush, were talking about the New World Order. I was talking about it because that is what was coming out, and knowing that the first time that inside of myself that I'd heard it was in conjunction with the Nazis, and that came from Mengele. And I started realizing that there was something going on, and then it scared me, and I didn't really look into it for years, but I was being harassed constantly. I was being told. At one point, I had someone telling me that I was being, and who was ex-Army intelligence, ex-CIA, telling me that I was being monitored by the National Security Agency, and I didn't have the whole story then, so I did not totally understand why this was happening. But yet I was being followed by cars or vans that said G12, G14, and in this last year, which has really been very hard, I've been followed by G41 vans, and I had to find out what those were, and that is naval intelligence. But this whole thing is going towards around the year 2000, and when they are going to establish themselves openly as a New World Order, and it's headed toward that, and that's what everything is being prepared to or prepared for. And I have actually got I've got a sleeping program right now to return, because I've left, but to return for that time, and it's called End Times Programming or Janus Programming.
And Janus relates back to Nimrod of Babylon.
Yeah, there is a group that used to be in contact with me all the time, and they stopped trying simply because I didn't obey them. They would be in contact with me all the time. They're called Janus, which is also the two-headed Roman god of change, and their headquarters is in Brussels, Belgium, in the NATO building. And they are a group of psychiatrists and doctors who are into mind control, and they are one of the many groups involved with the Illuminati. And they would contact me and tell me, give me directions that I was to psychically kill this person or psychically injure this person or scare this person. They'd give me the location. And I started questioning this, and I had a contact who since has seemed to have disappeared because she couldn't get the funding, and I had called her about this group, and she's the one that was the ex-CIA, ex-Army intelligence person, and she knew about these people, and she said, yes, you're right, this is what is going on.
Your experience being brought up in this Illuminati environment, were you ever told anything about where these reptilians came from, and what is the history of it all?
I was made to learn through Mothers of Darkness, which is a certain aspect of the organization, because that was an early part of my training, the history of what was the Illuminati on this planet. And what I learned was that the Aryans originally were from Mars, and the reptilians came to that planet they came from another place. They came to that planet. They came to rule because they wanted to mix, so they said, with that race, and but they became the overlords, and the Martians or Aryans were seeking to escape from it. They went to the moon and then were there attacked, and they then went to Earth and established culture here on Earth approximately 6,000 years ago. And at that point in time, they were doing well, and they were mixing with the indigenous population of this earth. They were getting along with. And then about 4,000 years ago, the reptilians arrived here and again began to take over. And they instilled themselves in different places underground in the earth, and also this one part of them, the ruling part, took over and became involved in the politics and in the religion, and started controlling through these means at that point in time, and using the gods and deities that were believed in on this planet, started infiltrating into that and becoming that, and things started, blood rituals started happening, and since that time, that is the way that it has been. And presently, they claim to come from the Merovingian bloodline. They are all of there are 13 bloodlines in Europe that all of what are called royalty are developed from or come from, and they include the Aryans in this. And there's been a big push in this century. For example, when Nazis came into power, the fascists, talking about the purity of being pure and staying, the Aryan bloodline staying pure, and what it actually is all about is keeping the blue-eyed, blonde or light red-haired people, the bloodlines pure, because it is more powerful. And what is in that blood for these reptilians is more powerful, and they need that. And when you start mixing it with people that were indigenous to this earth, then it is not as powerful. It has nothing to do with someone, skin color or nationality. It has to do with keeping the bloodline pure for their use.
So blonde-haired, blue-eyed people are the purest from the reptilians' point of view, and that they want to keep that bloodline pure because of how they need to use it. Yes.
When I realized that it had to do with blonde hair and blue eyes, I could not do anything about my eyes, and I am not able to wear contacts or I would have brown eyes. But one thing I did do was cut my hair off, because that was part of the rank I was. My hair was down to my knees, and I colored my hair darker. And there were times after I did cut it off, they had gotten to me, and so the hair would be light red, but that is being in compliance with them. And I did not want to be in compliance to them. I want to expose them, and this is part of it, and I won't be what they want me to be.
When you look at some of the ancient accounts, like the Sumerian texts and many other accounts, they talk about the gods interbreeding with humanity. Is this relevant to the reptilian way of infiltrating the human race?
Yes, it is, because human beings all through the ages have accepted gods interbreeding or being accepted as humans, and that shows in Christianity, it shows in Judaism. It also, they have used Egyptology, or the Egyptian religions, a lot, and the present head of the Illuminati compares himself a lot with the Egyptian god Osiris and Horus, which is Osiris reborn, and also with the Arthurian legends of the Round Table, and he has a name. The name that he carries from that is Pindar, which actually means phallus of the dragon. And the other name, Osiris, he has carried because he takes the name at this time, the Marquis de Libero, which means the liberator of or from the waters. And the story of Osiris is that he was cut into 14 pieces and thrown into the River Nile, and the one piece, Isis found the pieces and put them back together again, and she could not find the 15th piece, which happened to be the phallus, so a gold phallus was made. And this is very important in this group in the Illuminati. This is important, and it's important to think that about the head of the Illuminati, because what comes from a golden phallus would be a superior seed for a race, and this is how this is what they are doing with all of these bloodlines to keep the bloodlines going, are impregnating Aryan people of Aryan blood that hold high stations with them, impregnating them with this seed of Pindar. And therefore it's important to keep this history in mind and the names in mind that he is going by at this time.
So would it be correct to say that the reptilians came to this planet because the Aryan Martians came to this planet, and that the Aryan Martians gone somewhere else that have followed them there?
They would have pursued them all over the universe, yes.
Can we now go into some specifics about your own experiences? What were you brought up to do? You say that you were identified as a bloodline before you were born. What was the role that you were brought through to play?
The role that I was brought through to play was, as in the Illuminati, was as a goddess. Specifically, the address is Mother Goddess, Starfire. And the Starfire goes back to the blood in the menstrual blood, what is contained in that. And the address, the way that I was addressed, was Mother Goddess. There are only 3 Mother Goddesses. There can only be 3 at a time on this planet, and there is a male equivalent of which there can be only 3 of them.
Why mind control someone to conduct these rituals, like yourself? Why don't these reptilians just conduct their own rituals?
they don't seem to have the psychic abilities, and they look for people that have that and people in the bloodline that have that. And I have had that. I've had a tremendous amount of psychic ability, and so I was picked and bred from before birth, and this is also something that other survivors that have been in high positions have known about me and told me.
What's the connection then between you having psychic abilities, those being recognized from the start, and you being brought through to conduct their major rituals?
Well, it's kind of twofold. First of all, they needed the psychic abilities because they control or attempt to control events, because I would have the ability to foretell what was going to happen, and they needed the information to just try to control it to an outcome that was good for them. The second thing is that during the rituals, you had to have psychic ability. You have to be very powerful in that way to call out the old ones that are also reptilian, that come from another dimension. They actually they materialize from out of another dimension and are present at rituals, and they are so powerful, and their presence is there's such an evilness about them, and they want out of this other dimension, and they can't. They have to be called out by someone who has that power, and the reptilians don't have this power. That's very important, that they don't have this power to call out these old ones that have to do with them. And
what is it that humans have that the reptilians don't have, that means they don't have the power to connect interdimensionally, and some humans do?
We have the ability to foresee, to be able to become vibrationally higher, and see into those levels, go into those levels, and in fact, agencies use this. They call it remote viewing. To go, humans have the ability to go into the past, to go into the future, to go to other places, to astrally leave their body, astrally, and to see things that we've always had this ability, and it's like having the third eye, which they don't have. They don't have this ability. So during a ritual, these old ones are called out, and they are what Christianity would have called the demons. They are called out, and there is a circle that it has a hexagon in there, which is a powerful occultic symbol, and then there is a pentagram, and then there, in the middle of that, there is a triangle, and if you're the one calling them out, then you stand in the triangle so that you're not devoured or taken by these creatures that come out.
That creates an energy field around you which they can't penetrate.
They can't penetrate it, and they cannot get outside the pentagram. And they want out. They're always demanding to be let out. And so you have to be very powerful to keep them in line and to make them go back when it is time for them to go back.
Why do the reptilians want to manifest these quote demons at the rituals?
It brings power to the rituals. It brings power to them. They are told things by these entities, and they are encouraged to go on with what they're doing, and knowledge is imparted to them through these entities. but it takes a person with the ability to bring them out and make them answer, because they don't want to cooperate. They have to cooperate when the right person has control over them.
And that's to do with that person's energy and ability to use
right.
energy.
Yes.
You talked about the Aryan race coming from Mars. One expression of it seems to be very clearly what we call the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians had two deities, St. George, which became a British deity, who defeated the dragon, which seems incredibly symbolic, and also St. Michael, who, according to the legend, banished Satan, or this negative force, into the abyss. Is this symbolism of the abyss anything to do with the fact that these reptilian demons of another dimension are somehow locked in a time-space prison, and they can't get out, and they can only get out when they're brought out in that way?
Yes, they want out of that dimension. They have been thrown into that dimension, and they can't leave that dimension. And that's actually what the abyss is about, is being in a different dimension. It's like something to do with the fourth dimension. And before I even knew, for example, what I was saying, or I realized what I was saying, I would be saying things to my therapist and other survivors that the fourth dimension was a dimension to stay away from. Not at that time understanding the whole thing.
Why do these rituals take place at certain key times of the year, and so often are related to the phases of the moon?
Because the moon has an influence on this planet, and also the sun. These also take place during different things that go on with the sun, but the moon it's kind of a really very cyclical thing with the moon. And it takes place on full moons, new moons. It has to do with the current religion, or what they're using, the Druid religion that they've taken and used. They still hold on to the Egyptology type of religion. They hold on to the Druidism, though, and they're currently calling themselves Druidic or Druid. And Druidism is tied in with the cycles of the moon, on which it has to do with planting, sowing, and harvesting. And there are so many days that they can use from this to their own purpose and their own end, that they bring it about. There's a lot of ritualization with Druidism, and they love ritualization.
So take us through one of these rituals that you conducted at the highest level of this global brotherhood. What would happen?
There were people that were bred from birth. They were bred to be ritual sacrifices. I have a problem with what they is said a lot today, especially by the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, that how could all of these people disappear, or how could all these babies be born? I worked with a nurse midwife. We did home births, and it's very easy not to register a child when it's born. And then they have these children that they're kidnapping and bringing in from other countries, and no one misses them because these are third world countries. And children they have the most energy, the purest energy, they're the highest form of sacrifice. And they will terrorize these children and mind control these children. And in rituals, by the time they're brought into rituals, they may be drugged, or they may not be drugged, or they may be in an altered state because of the mind control, and they are used as actual blood sacrifices during these rituals because of, again, reptilians needing their blood. And they will take various organs from the sacrifices depending on what date the ritual may, what the ritual may be associated with on that date. But they will also slit the throat from the left ear to the right ear, and the blood will be gathered in a goblet, and it will be dispersed among the reptilians, and dispersed among, also after that, among people that have been participating in these rituals and seem to have it, even though they seem to be dissociated, mostly these people seem to be cognizant of what they are doing.
Are these rituals rare? I mean, how many are there that, say, go on a year? I mean, we talking hundreds or thousands? Or?
There are things happening every month of the year. There is not a month in this 12-month system that something is not happening. And it's more than one. I mean, it's every full moon. It's, and the very important rituals are the summer solstice and the winter solstice, and then there is the vernal equinox and the fall equinox. And there is Samhain, and there is Beltane, there is Imbolc in February, there is Lughnasadh, which is in the beginning of August. There's a whole week leading up to Beltane, and also leading up to Samhain, that's called Grand Climax.
So May the 1st is Beltane.
May the 1st is Beltane.
Halloween, particularly in America, has become like a mini Christmas, almost like a holiday of celebration with a trick and treat and all this other stuff. But what actually happens outside the public arena that night of Halloween and into November the 1st?
Away from the public arena, there's a ritual that's taking place in 6 different locations in this country for all of the councils of 13 in the area that I'm in. It is the East Side Christian Church on 7th and Temple Street in Long Beach. And it is for the High Council of 13. And in this country on that night, it is a satanic ritual. It's actually, there are 3 nights in a row at that church. The first night is Halloween.
What happens on the night of Halloween?
That night is about the worship and homage to Satan. And that is what a lot of people in this country know the devil to be. This is about the devil, Satan. And Christianity talks constantly. I mean, I believe they created Christianity to be what it is. And so they also have created this Satan. And so they control in that way. And on that night there's a lot of bloodshed, and there are sacrifices made to Satan. There is a person who plays the part of this in this High Council that has to do with this High Council. He's not on the High Council, but he has to do with playing the part of Satan. He is a televangelist on TBN. He used to be, he filled in for a little while as a lead singer on Iron Butterfly many years ago, and he has long blonde hair.
What's his name?
At this point, I don't recall his name. It just, I recognize his face. I saw it recently on on TVN, and then this is his cover, or he is DID, and he plays this part, the great deceiver Satan, on that night, on Halloween, at this church. And that is what happens on Halloween. And I mean, what else I must say, what is going on with Halloween in this country? It's just becoming so popular. It is also to desensitize people to the whole thing, and even this backlash Christian movement that wants to call it the Harvest Festival. It does not realize that the Harvest Festival has to do with Druidic religion. And again, they are still doing the same thing and celebrating the Harvest Festival. That's what the Harvest Festival is about.
Are many of the so-called Christian rituals, because that's what they are, or festivals or ceremonies, are they actually, to most Christians, unknowing representations of these satanic rituals?
Yes, they are. One, for example, Christmas has to do with it's a time, it comes right after the winter solstice, which is a satanic or a Druidic celebration. It has to do, there's a day in there called that day which is not a day. It has to do with the killing of the old king and the birth of the new king, which is a Druidic day. On the 24th or the 25th at midnight, there is a ceremony that's specifically for children, and it's called the last bulb on the tree.
Where does that come from?
That is something that's used with children. It's part of programming them into the whole thing. And there were things that would happen to the child that hung the last bulb on the tree on Christmas Eve, as it was a common practice to decorate the tree on Christmas Eve, and the tree in itself is a phallic symbol, and it's paganistic. Christmas is based on a pagan day, and back to Roman times, and Christians have given it, they think they have given it Christian meaning, and it means something else, and it does not. But there is the case that with the last bulb on the tree that has something to do with what happened to this little girl, JonBenet.
JonBenet Ramsey?
Yes, JonBenet Ramsey. And